Hi, Cassie.
Hi, Claire. How are you?
Good. It's so good to talk with you. We haven't talked in a while.
I know. I'm excited to be here. I get 50 minutes with you. This is great.
Okay, so I'm going to read your, official bio just so that folks know what you're up to and what you've been up to, and then we'll kind of dig down more into it.
All right, great.
So, Cassie Boorn is the founder and CEO of Modern Thrive, an online education platform for creative professionals. She spent 5 years building digital marketing programs for some of the largest brands in the world and helping influencers develop their online platforms. Cassie has always been passionate about connecting people with opportunities that help them make amazing things happen. She left her full-time position at Disney Interactive to launch Modern Thrive, a platform that would empower people everywhere to build a career they love. Cassie has a deep understanding of how large brands and influential bloggers leverage content and social media to build communities around their work. Cassie has been writing online since 2009. Her work has been featured in a wide array of national media outlets, including NPR, All Things Considered, Forbes, and the New York Times. So welcome, Cassie. So tell us a little bit more kind of about your story. What brought you to sort of being here in this room and, running your
Yeah,
own thing with these like kids under your feet. And yeah, tell us kind of the
yeah,
story.
definitely. So I started I would say I started trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career, probably my sophomore year of college. And so I was like 20, 22. I had I'm trying to think. I had like a 3-year-old son, and I was like, okay, I'm going to graduate in a couple of years. It was 2009, so the economy was like trashed, and like I'm going to graduate in a couple of years with a philosophy degree in Illinois, and I have to build a career with that. And so I started working online and looking for career opportunities that would let me do really interesting work and connect me with interesting people, but that I could do from home because I knew that I didn't want to move us. I didn't want to kind of uproot us. And so from there, I ended up connecting with a large community of bloggers and online influencers and people who were building these great businesses online. And while I worked with them through college, and that led me to getting a job with a PR agency that was based in New York and working on online marketing programs with influencers. And so that whole evolution of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life and where I wanted to work and what kinds of things I wanted to do was so interesting to me. And so I launched Modern Thrive last April, so it's a year old now. And my goal is to help people figure out what they want to do with their lives and show them kind of the path to getting there. And so we do workshops with different creative professionals who've done really interesting things with their lives and kind of talk about how they got there and what they learned. And, that's, kind of giving people a way to figure out what path they want to take.
Wow. Okay. So talk me through kind of what it took for you to go out on a limb, especially with, a young kid and say, I'm going to ditch this full-time job at Disney and I'm going to go out and start my own thing, because I think that's a pretty scary thing, obviously, to do. And I'm sure there are folks watching this today that in some way maybe want to do that, but, think it's irresponsible or unrealistic or any number of sort of things. So walk us through what that looked like to make that decision, essentially.
Yeah, and it was incredibly scary. So when I was at Disney, I was working from home, but I was basically traveling to New York every other week. So I would spend like 10 days a month in New York, which is like you don't have a life. Like when you come
Mm.
home, you are exhausted. And I had 2 kids, and I just knew the work I was doing was so exciting that I could have kept doing it forever. But I had a family, and I knew that I needed to kind of reprioritize things, which is, I think, when most people consider leaving corporate America. And also, though, it's like you have this family that you have to, continue to feed and keep a roof over their head
Mm-hmm.
once you leave. And so things kind of came to a head when there was an opportunity for me to move to New York and kind of take a promotion. But I didn't want to do that. Like I wanted to stay
Mm.
where I was. I wanted to keep doing the work I was doing, and that just wasn't the path I wanted to take. And so then once I realized that that wasn't going to work, I started talking to, other people in my space about ideas I had and business ideas. And I connected with Penelope Trunk, and she was working on a new startup. And so we had been talking for months before, I officially left Disney about working together. And so when I left, I knew that I had some work there. And so I think when people think about leaving, people are like, put money in a savings account. But it's like, you can't save up 6 months of expenses in like a year. So, it's just, that's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But what is realistic is like, find a job that can guarantee you the minimum you need to live once you leave, and then, leave yourself time to figure out other ways to make money. And if you do that, you'll be fine. And there was a period, so I worked with Penelope, I worked on lots of different projects, but there was a period too when I was on unemployment and I was like figuring out my next move, and like, that's okay. And I think a lot of people feel like I have to have my savings account and I have to plan and I have to, but a lot of it is, even if you have a plan, when you leave a full-time job to go on your own, nothing goes as expected. It doesn't feel the way you think it's going to be. Everything is different. And it's kind of like, I think, like planning to have a baby. And you're like, I have this whole plan. It's going to go like this. And then you have the baby and they're like totally different than everything you expected. And it's very much the same of like, it makes you feel comfortable to have a plan, but it doesn't make you that much more prepared because everyone's business is different, especially when you're self-employed. So I think that's just like a big lesson I learned is, you don't have to kind of have all of your ducks in a row. You just have to have, give yourself a platform to launch from.
That's really great. You don't have to have all your ducks in a row. You just need a platform to launch from. I love that. I'm writing it down furiously. So you had basically a little bit of a buffer because you knew you had this gig with Penelope Trunk for a bit of time, and then that would help you sort of move on to the next thing or attach on to the next thing as you worked with her, essentially.
Yeah, and so we worked together, I think it was like 9 to 10 months, and I was working with her full time on her startup. And then I wanted to do more different kinds of projects. So like, I didn't want to do the same kinds of things. And the way she was going with her startup was a bit different. So I started taking on other projects, other consulting gigs, and kind of building from there. But what you find is when you're self-employed, you always have more time on your hands than if you're in corporate America because you're not talking to people all day. No one's calling you if you didn't schedule a call with them. And so all of that time you can spend thinking of like other ways to make money. And like, I would have 12 different projects going at a time that were like all on different schedules. But it's like, that's what you have to do in the beginning to pay the bills. And like, it's all a race. But eventually, and I've seen this too in working with a lot of creative entrepreneurs, is I've interviewed so many artists and illustrators and writers, and all of them said they worked for 3 years on their craft without making like a livable wage.
Ooh.
And then they started to earn money because it takes 3 years to figure out how you're going to make money, So I think that's something that people don't talk about is like how long it took them to figure out how to make money.
Okay, let's dig more into that because that's really fascinating. So again and again, people are pointing to this 3-year number.
Yes. Like tons of people. I interviewed Lisa Congdon, and she said she's like 3 years writing her blog, doing her Instagram, doing her stuff before it was like a full-time gig. Like she made some money, but it wasn't like she could live on it. She had to have another job. And a lot of artists, I have another one I just talked to, her name's like Estee McLeod, and she sells her paintings in private galleries and sells like tons of paintings for lots and lots of money. And she was taught ceramics for 20 years and painted part-time to build up that business because you can't just jump into selling paintings in galleries. Like it takes time. So I think, everyone, there's kind of a path of like, how long does it take you to earn from that? But again and again, I've seen 3 years, if you continually do your blog, do your work, do your business, regardless of whether or not it's earning you a full-time income, within 3 years it will.
And so these are writers, but these are also artists in a broader sense. So these are artists in the broad sense. Some of them are writers and some of them are doing very different other things, right?
Yeah, so some of them would be kind of, I would say like both a mix of product and service businesses. So they might be selling like art, they might be a freelance illustrator, they might be writing and publishing books. It's kind of a whole mix of things. And that's kind of, I think, the reason that it takes that 3 years is to figure out what you have to do to earn the income you want and, how those projects roll out and what the timelines, and kind of get into that groove. And then after that, learning period, then you start to have a way of like, oh, this is how I earn money, and here are the things I have to do to earn the amount I need to live. And so it gets more and more comfortable, I think, and you get just a better sense of what you have to do to reach your goals.
Okay, so then talk us through kind of how that worked in your own life in terms of you. So you left your full-time gig at Disney, you started with Penelope, and you started working with her basically full-time for 9 or 10 months. But then at what point did you decide you were going to do more than just consulting? You were actually going to launch something of your own. And how did you get to that decision?
Yeah, so a little backtracking. So before I got my job in PR, I actually worked with bloggers for, I think it was like 2 or 2.5 years, and I got paid nothing. Like I was like helping them sell ads and writing their thing and like following them around at conferences, like carrying their bags. Like I got paid nothing. And it's like, but those relationships got me the job and like got my foot in the door. And so when I left Disney, I think I worked with Penelope for a year, and then it took me about a year where I was consulting. So what I was doing is I was consulting and then organizing classes on the side. So our business model is we find people who have an audience and have a really interesting story. We package them into a course, and then we help them sell it. And so I was doing it on a one-to-one basis where I would find somebody and we'd do it on their site, and I was kind of seeing how much does each course earn, how does this work, but I had kind of been playing around with that while I was working with Penelope and while I was at Disney. Like it was kind of, I'd been learning about that space for a long time. And then about a year after I was consulting, I finally launched the company. The only reason it happened is I got funding from a local angel investor that helped me make the pivot, because going from a service business to a product business is hard. Like you have to have money in the bank because product businesses, it takes more to make money, and so I think that that's the only reason I could pivot there. But it was that, I had spent I would say 4 to 5 years part-time kind of studying how online courses worked, how people were selling them, how people were packaging themselves, and then taking everything I learned to kind of piece together a plan for what I was going to build.
And so that's interesting that you actually part of the pivot for you was made through the help of a local angel. So what did that look like? Because that's not necessarily something that, anyone can just do, but I'm sure you learned lessons that maybe anyone could learn from, essentially.
Yeah, this is the exciting thing is, like, I live in Illinois in a town of like 20,000 people, and I got an angel investor to fund my idea, which basically means that anyone in any small town can do that as well. And so I think that something like that feels very scary, but typically in Midwestern areas or anywhere, even if it's not a big city, if you have a middle-sized city, there are a couple investors in town who are interested in building entrepreneurship in the city. Like that's their job. And so what you have to do is find those people and see if it's a fit for what you want to get funded. So I got really lucky in that I had this idea for building an education platform, and one of the 2 investors we have in town is focused on building socially minded businesses. And so like all he has to do is build startups that change the world. So I didn't even have a pitch deck when I approached him. I was like, I have this idea. And he was so interested in just the broader idea of what I had that then he asked me to make a pitch deck. So I think a lot of times you feel like, again, I have to have my deck, I have to have my plan, I have to call the people and submit the right way. But it's more of like, what opportunities are available around you? What are you working on that's a fit for those opportunities? And then kind of making that match. And so kind of working with the resources that you have and figuring out how to do that. And so if I had went to, Chicago or San Francisco and pitched my business, maybe I would have got a bunch of funding, but it's like that would have been very expensive for me. It would have taken me a couple of years, and I didn't have that. So you can kind of look at, what opportunities will work for where I'm at, and people will find a lot more than they think.
That's amazing. So what was it like when you kind of went to him and gave this pitch and you weren't really sure you were doing it right and you didn't really know what you were doing? What was it like then to hear that, yes, he was going to invest in you? What did that mean in that moment?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time researching, you can find pitch examples online, and everything I do, I spend a lot of time researching and just asking everyone in my close circle of anyone that knew anything about startups, about pitching and what advice they have. I'd make them look at my pitch and tell me what they hated about it. And I'd go back and fix it. So I had a pretty good sense of like what I needed to go in with, what, was expected, but I didn't know if he would say yes or no.
Sure.
But the thing that was good, I always say if people are going to leave their job, they should start building a service business because it's like costs nothing. You can have an hourly wage. So I knew that if he said no, I still had my consulting business and I could still do, like I wasn't out anything. And if he said yes, then I had the opportunity to do something really cool. And so I think anytime you can go into a meeting knowing I don't need this, but if I get it, it's going to be really great. It gives you a little bit of confidence. But then when I found out he was going to fund it, I was really excited, and then I was like completely overwhelmed because I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to do a startup, and figuring out what that path looks like and how it's different, and that was its own journey. But yeah, it was very exciting and completely unexpected because I honestly thought that it would be something that I'd have to build really slowly by myself over many, many years, and so finding that just totally fast-tracked everything I was doing.
So it sounds like obviously, getting angel funding is very like glitz and glamour because you can fast track things, but I'm sure there are kind of some downsides and challenges that come with not building slowly as well, right?
Yes. So a lot of it for me, and it really depends on who your investor is and what their expectations are. So mine is very understanding, but for me, it's like, so I was hosting these courses and I knew how it kind of worked and what the business plan was. But then when your website launches 2 weeks late and, your course, your promotion doesn't go out till a week later. And so all of your revenue for the first month is like kind of in the second month. And now all of ththese little things start to happen that you don't expect and you don't foresee. And so you have to pick yourself up very quickly. I say every day I celebrate something great I did because I think I'm the best person in the world, and then I'm crying in my room because I think I'm a total failure. And it's that is literally what it looks like. It's you do something every day that literally feels like this is the end of my business, I'm done, and something every day that's oh, I'm on to the next big thing, and it's a total roller coaster, which is something that you hear people say that. You hear people talk about mental health issues in the startup world, but it's not until you're doing it that you're the expectations of what needs to happen and how quickly, it's a lot of pressure. And so I think too, and I even talked about this recently, we were talking about raising more funding, and my investor said, he's an INFJ, which is your type. So he's very understanding.
INFJ, yeah. Cassie, the funny story about Cassie for everyone is I one time some years ago got some email. All it said, the subject line was just you're an INFJ, aren't you? And I was I don't even remember. And I, Googled and figured out that I was. And it was hi, Cassie, how are you? But that was the entire email. And you were right. And it was just a weird email.
I know. And I started studying personality types and I can guess anyone's type. It's my favorite thing in the world. And I did the same thing to my investor, and he was I think I'm an INFJ. It was the same conversation. And so I haven't stopped doing that to people. But when I was telling him about the idea of raising more funding, he said, Cassie, you really need to think about what path you want to take. If you continue building this business as you are now, you could have a comfortable salary in a couple of years, less than a year, probably a comfortable salary, a couple of employees. You could live a nice life. And if you raise more funding, you're running a multi-million-dollar company. That's completely different. And it's something that people have to consider, which they don't often, because they're I just got to get to the next level. I got to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's how big do you want to be? How much money do you want to, what do you want your daily life to look like? That's the most important thing to consider, because if you don't like your daily life, none of it's sustainable. So I think that's, an important lesson.
Wow, that's really powerful. And so did you come to a decision about what you were going to do, or are you kind of in the middle of that decision of figuring it out right now?
So I was well, the first one sounded boring. That's what I said. Comfortable salary, and the 2 employees to me was that's boring. I want to see how big it is. And something that I've learned about my personality is like I'm a big picture person. Like I can't get into the minutiae of like managing something to the end. Like I'm very much like big picture idea into the world and then launching the next big picture thing. And so the idea of building something really big is just like exciting and challenging, and like I could work very, very hard just knowing that I can build it as big as I can. But if someone was like, you're going to do the same work and like you're going to earn this and your bills are going to be paid, and it's just kind of like, well then what, like what's the challenge, you know?
Wow.
And so I think for me, but I think that's very rare. I think most people would be like, I'll take the comfortable salary and like the summer vacations. And I'm like, vacations are like so stressful for me. Like I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think about. I just want to call people and talk to them about work. Like it's very uncomfortable because it's just like my mind is always going with ideas. And so it's really hard for me to just be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and relax and have like a peaceful time because my head's always full of new things.
Wow. Okay, so this is really interesting. Okay, so now tell me about what it looks like for you to encourage kind of the entrepreneurs that you're learning from in Modern Thrive, because I mean you're kind of doing two things by serving as kind of the organizer of these courses that they're leading. You're obviously learning a lot from them, but it sounds like you're also kind of coming from a place of really kind of inspiring them to go out on their own and to do more to build their own businesses. What has that journey been like?
Yeah, so we do a lot of stuff. We have like free coaching. I do like we have different series you can go through to like help learn how to build your business, and we have all kinds of resources. So I spend a lot of time working with the people who are taking our workshops and webinars and just learning from them about, you know, what they're struggling with and how we can better kind of support them. And what I found is it's typically two things. One, people aren't confident in what they're doing and they just need someone to tell them it's good enough. So most people who are working from home, you're working by yourself. You're judging if your work's good enough. And sometimes you're just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I could sell this to a big company. I don't know if someone would buy into this. And most of the time the answer is yes. Like there is somebody who would buy in. Like everything could be sold to somebody. So, you know, I think people a lot of times just need someone to be like, yes, your work's good enough. You should do this as a business. And that's enough for them to be like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously, because, you know, I feel like you don't really get that from, you know, your friends or your husband or, you know, your spouse isn't going to be like, you love to do artwork, like go start an art business. I think that is a great, but it's like, you know, no one's going to do that. But, you know,
all the artists are crying right now.
Like, but I'm the person that's like, yeah, if you want to sell your artwork, you can absolutely do that, because, you know, the reality is, and this is another interesting thing that I learned about careers is the biggest impact, the thing that has the biggest impact on what career someone chooses is what career their parents had. Because when you're growing up, you see these people having these careers around you. And so when you're older, like those things seem within reach of you. So like if someone has a father who's a doctor, it seems like anyone could be a doctor. Like you just go to medical school, that's all you do. But if you have never met an adult that's a doctor, that's like a friend or someone you're comfortable with, it's like that's something those people do. And so a lot of times artists and writers and creative types, no one around them is doing that. And so they have no model or sense of what that looks like. And so no one's telling them to pursue that as a career because no one knows anything about it. Wow. And the reality is like, there's a million ways to make money with anything. It's like, if you're an artist, you can do licensing, you can do freelancing, you can do books, you can do, you know, posters, you can do advertising, you know, there's this whole range, but, you know, you have to, how do you learn what those options are, I think? And that's kind of we're trying to be the catalyst for that, of like connecting you to what the options are and helping you pick the best one for you. And especially to like, if you're a writer, like there are a lot of ways for writers to make money online right now. Like if you're a writer and you are a freelance copywriter, like you can make a sustainable income very quickly. You know, like it's that simple, but you have to know somebody who's a copywriter to know how they package themselves and who hires them and how much they get paid. And so that's what I kind of try to do, is connect people to the information, kind of the real life information, not someone saying like, you should do, but like, here's what this person did that worked really well for them. And I think, and like people learn from that, seeing that experience.
You know, I love that. It's like being an encourager of basically artists to become entrepreneurs. It's fantastic. Wow, that's great. This has been super valuable, Cassie. Can you share with folks where people can find you and learn more about what you're working on right now, and make sure that we know really fully what it is you're really focused on right now also?
Yes, awesome. So yes, so they can go to modernthrive.com, and we have a newsletter so they can sign up and get career advice, but we also have free coaching. So you can basically submit any career problem you have, and it comes to me, and then I email you back with like something, a call to action probably that you'll have to do. And then we have tons of workshops on there. So I think if anyone's feeling stuck on figuring out what it is they should do or what their next step is, like just ask, like, I'm one mentor that you don't even have to pitch. Like you could just send the email. It's totally non-scary. So I think that would be the one thing is, if they have questions about their career or finding their path, I'm happy to talk.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here, Cassie. This was awesome.
No problem. This was fun. Thanks, Claire.